Half a day. Thank you, everyone, for being here at our round table today. The Committee on Culture Justice, in partnership with the Committee on Housing, Utilities, Public Safety, and Homeland Security, and the Committee on Innovation and Economic Workforce and Youth Development, along with the Honorable Senator Mary Camacho Torres, who will be with us today on Skype, and the Honorable Senator Luis B. Muña is now called to order. Today's Tuesday, April 17, 2018, and the time is 3:15 p.m. Notices for the joint roundtable discussion were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on April 12 and again on April 16, 2018. I'd like to thank my colleagues for attending this afternoon's roundtable, beginning with our Legislative Secretary and Senator Regine Bisco-Lee, Senator Talina Nelson, Senator Luis Muña, and Senator Mary Torres, as I said, will be tuning in on Skype as soon as we're finished with a couple slides on the PowerPoint. This is our first time to Skype, so please bear with us. Yes. And I want to especially thank all our panel participants today and the ones who could not fit at the table but are here and available for us. And I very much thank you, and I welcome your input, and we'll just try to accommodate that as we go along. And so thank you very, very much for being here, and thank you to the public for tuning in. So today, our panel participants have been invited to discuss strategies and services available to support child protective agencies and housing agencies on Guam in their efforts to prevent the threat of harm to children living without adequate shelter and to expand emergency shelter and support services. Due to the limited amount of time to discuss this topic, which is very broad and of course is being addressed by many, many sectors of our community, including nonprofits, volunteers, agencies, the governor's office, everyone. We would just like to ask that you indulge us as we narrow the focus of conversation for today on the issue of securing emergency shelter for homeless children vulnerable to harm. For more information on the issue of homelessness on Guam, you can access the Guam Legislature's YouTube channel to view and listen to the roundtable discussion on housing for the homeless that was held on Thursday, February 15, 2018, facilitated by Senator Talina Nelson, chairperson of the Committee on Housing, Utilities, Public Safety, and Homeland Security. That was the date to view our YouTube videos. You need to know the date, so on that one was Thursday, February 15, 2018. The video for this hearing can also be accessed and it will be transcribed and available on the Guam Legislature's website or on the YouTube channel today's date, which is April 17, 2018. Reports on updated demographics of homeless persons on Guam can be found in the January 2017 HUD Point-in-Time Homeless Count Report, available online at GURA's website, www.gura.org. The DPHSS Department of Public Health Bureau of Social Services Administration 2017 Annual Report is available online at the DPHSS website at dol.guam.gov. And many of the statistics that we have been using in our press releases and in our discussions come from these reports, and I thank these agencies for making these available to the public and to us. All right, so I wanted to just begin with a very, very, very brief background on why we are here today. So this effort, I mean, and as I said, there are many, many efforts ongoing, but this particular effort is to seek emergency shelter and support services for homeless children, is one that we have agreed to take on together in order to seek justice for two young girls who were recent victims of rape, one of the worst forms of violence that a human being can be subjected to. Both girls were living in an abandoned shelter near Catalina Lane in Dedido, where the incidents took place. One girl was only 4 years old, and the other a young girl with a disability. The irony of these events is that the structure that they were living in sits just outside a community dedicated to caring for people in need, including our Guma San Jose homeless shelter, our Island Girl Power Empowerment Center, the DYA Lago Youth Center, Maria Ulloa Elementary School, Benavente Middle School is just up the street from this area, and there are many other areas like this on Guam, but this, I'm just using this one as an example to really hone in on a point. Despite the proximity to these support systems, these young girls fell through the cracks and were victimized. Sadly, some of these families have been part of or are currently part of our government and nonprofit systems of care. Similarly, the location of homeless children are often known to our police department, the mayors, and other service providers. So we're close, but yet we still have a gap. So we commend these service providers, along with the Division of CPS, for doing their best with the limited resources available to provide for and protect our island's children and struggling families. These tragic events, however, along with the current statistics on homelessness and child abuse, are a clear indication of a gap and the current urgent need to expand and support our protective agencies. According to the 2017 HUD point-in-time homeless count, 41% of the total 637 homeless persons living on Guam are below the age of 18. I'm just going to repeat that for the listeners. 41% of the total 637 homeless persons on Guam are below the age of 18. 41%. In 2017, the Bureau of Social Services Administration reported that 2,205 of our island's children were referred to CPS for maltreatment. 609 of those were for physical abuse, 371 for sexual abuse, and 1,048 for physical neglect, amongst other categories. All right. Some of the current efforts to address housing for the homeless include, and I'm going to go through these real quick, but each of you might have an opportunity to say a little more if you feel it's necessary. Guma San Jose Family Shelter is located in Dedido. It's at maximum capacity with a waiting list of approximately 60 families at a time, and the Ordat Men's Shelter is also consistently at capacity. The Ali Shelter for Children and Victims of Domestic Violence shelters has a maximum capacity of, the Children's Shelter has a maximum capacity of 12 and is consistently at capacity. All of these shelters are managed pursuant to Department of Public Health and Social Services contracts with the Catholic Social Services. GURA has various housing programs aimed at assisting homeless families. In particular, they have their Housing First and Special Purpose Voucher Program, which provides, I think, at a minimum 150 vouchers for homeless families. GURA is responsible for having converted vacant homes or old buildings into shelters and transitional housing, amongst many of its other programs. The Housing First program, however, is at capacity. Guam Housing is also actively involved in programs dedicated to homeless and 30-day emergency housing. And I think it's also actively partnering with WestCare for particularly veterans housing and maybe others. And foster families also provide shelter and homes for homeless children at this point, or children under the care of CPS. And these are all regulated by the Department of Public Health under the Division of Child Protective Services. DYA and Sanctuary provide temporary shelter for homeless minors who are waiting for foster care placement or reunification with families. The Guam Homeless Coalition is a support network of government agencies and nonprofit organizations that work to provide and conduct community outreach in order to link homeless individuals and families with support. Their annual, they have many outreach events, and I just wanted to make a shout out to the one that's coming up. I heard on May 11 at the Chamorro Village, they will have a Passport to Services outreach event. And this is to provide resources, services, and pretty much link homeless that they can reach, and with the services that all these the coalition is able to provide. So we want to thank these agencies and service providers whom are here today for all their great work. It's you who are doing the legwork to reach out, and you who have the relationship with the children and families that we are talking about today. You have expressed to us the need to address the growing demand for housing and services as your programs are consistently at capacity, and we thank you for your continuing work. All right, we're asking that we are particularly looking to and asking that CPS, because it's their mandate, we feel, under Guam law and the Guam Police Department, expand efforts to investigate suspected child abuse and neglect, in particular, to determine and assess children living without adequate shelter, which poses the threat to harm to their well-being. CPS, on our screen now, we have, this is just one of the, we have an entire Child Protective Act in our statutes, and this is just one of the provisions which I feel specifically outlines, you know, our ability, or CPS's ability to determine, to be, the physical health of the child, if it's adversely affected because the person responsible for the child's welfare has not regularly provided the child in a timely manner with adequate food, adequate clothing, adequate shelter, psychological care, physical care, health care, or supervision when financially able to do so. So we recognize the challenges that CPS is faced in trying to meet this mandate. The Child Protective Act further requires that GPD, Guam Police Department, is mandated to report suspected child abuse or neglect to CPS and the Attorney General. And that CPS is mandated to investigate, and they've got all very strict timelines of when they're required to investigate reports. So this whole section of the code discusses mandated reporting of child abuse or neglect cases to CPS, and so we just like to inform the public one more time that we do have in law mandatory reporting for teachers, doctors, and other people who are in contact with children. They have to report to CPS if they suspect abuse or neglect, and CPS is mandated to follow up with these, and with these mandates, CPS has their hands full for sure. So what we are looking for is indeed to go beyond this also, and to, even without bringing them into the court system, just to be sure that we have taken a look and are accounting for the homeless children and their welfare, if whenever we can. All right, I think at this point we are going to, that's the last slide? Yes, we're going to Skype in now with Senator Therese. And then we have just a very limited amount of questions for each of you that we'd like to just get the facts out there, and then we will have a more free-flowing discussion, if you can bear with us. Thank you very much. All right. And so, is that her? Okay. And then Senator Regine Bisco-Lee will begin with the questioning. Hi, Senator Therese.
Hafide, Senator Therese. We're making legislative history today by having you in on Skype, so thank you for joining us. I guess the first question, if we could direct it to Acting Director for DPHSS, Mr. Leo Casil. If you could just please speak to the feasibility of an emergency shelter and support services for homeless children. We know that currently BOSA, the mandate and the funding of $1 million is $1 million less than senior citizens. So we wanted to ask what support would be needed from the legislature and other agencies for us to accomplish the goal of an emergency shelter and additional support services for homeless children.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, that is a very broad question, and you know, we support all your assistance. Okay, and now I know the shelters that we have are limited, you know, and of course funding, land, and all that needs to come in play. And I know Gura in our when I was at Castle Service played a big role in providing the land and even the funding, because one shelter just cost $1 million. Well, like I said, we are supportive of any assistance you can give us to our staff and so on. And the feasibility, like I said, is would be great if we had all the resources. Now, in terms of perhaps the programs, and I guess the main gist here is I'm not sure, but it says prevention or taking care of, because taking care of, is limited. Like all we have for the abuse is Ali shelter, and I think by law, let me right, they're only required to have 12 at a time, and I think that's local law, right? So these are some of the shortcomings. Probably it's time to expand it. I'm not sure. Okay, so if those are the intent of the legislature, then like I say, we are welcome to to any expansion, provided that the resources are there. Okay, and as far as the budget, you said 1 million. Well, I hate to compare the dollars on what's more or so, because the senior citizens has they have a role too that they need, and a lot of emphasis was there because not only do they provide for the programs that you talk about, but they also do the feeding program for the Monamcos, and that's also a big amount, and so. That's probably why. But with BOSA and ours, yes, I think it's been a while that they did receive maybe more funding or more expansion, and I'm sure the staff there and Linda and the rest can probably give more insights. You want to do that, Linda? You want to give them more?
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. And yeah, we agree with you. We think that, there isn't enough. There aren't enough resources for us to manage senior citizens. There aren't enough resources for us to really attack some of the gaps that I know the Vice Speaker had addressed and then you also addressed. So we have the Guma San Jose shelter that is supposed to take care of a lot of these homeless individuals, homeless families, but they're consistently at maximum capacity. And then with the Ali shelter, they provide services for a niche. Not everyone can come into the Ali shelter. Many victims, they're able to accept those folks, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide services for kids before they become victims. We want to prevent that from happening. So I guess my next question would be to CPS Administrator Linda Rodriguez. In light of the shortage of foster homes, which we've discussed, and then also the shortage of shelter, will the availability of an emergency shelter for homeless children and or families help CPS to fulfill its mandates under the Child Protective Act?
Yes, absolutely. Any other additional services would, of course, help not only CPS, but our whole community. We see homelessness rising. We see child abuse cases rising. Just within the last couple of months, we've had to remove several children from large families, as much as 5, 6, 7. And Ms. Mayfei Moiko, who is the supervisor who oversees the intake crisis unit, can attest to this. We've had a lot of challenges on trying to find placements for children. And definitely, we would definitely need these, another type of homeless shelter. So we don't have to exert custody over children. We could work with families. We don't have to drag them through the court system, get them into services. And of course, our job is to protect children on this island. We don't want to see children residing in homes out there that are not safe for them. So anything that's available for families on Guam, and especially for children, we are all in support for that. And we encourage the public, if they see anything out there, whether it be a child that's being neglected or abused, we encourage them to make a referral to CPS. Although we are limited in staff, we only have 15 social workers in the Child Protective Services unit right now. And as Vice Speaker Terlaje mentioned, that's over 2,000 referrals that we had last fiscal year. Of course, I'm going to admit to everybody, we cannot touch every single referral. We only have 15 CPS workers. So I don't know how exactly this new shelter is going to work, but I know it will be beneficial to us in some way.
Thank you. How can this CPS division be better supported in your mission to protect children from the threat of harm?
Probably if we were fully staffed. Right now, like I said, we only have 15. We would like to hire more staff, but right now our federal funding has not come in. But when it does, we hope that we will be able to recruit for those positions, and hopefully it won't be a very long process. I do have workers right now that are challenged every day, not only trying to find homes for families and working with families, but they're feeling the burden of the stressors. They go through a lot of stress. This is a lot of pressure. A lot of people have a job from 8 to 5. My workers don't. Sometimes they work beyond 5 o'clock. Of course, if there's an emergency out there, Ms. Moiko sends out a crisis worker. But when you work with families and you work with children and you see them being abused and neglected, when you go home, and I know this from prior experience because I used to be a worker myself once upon a time, your brain does not turn off to what you see. And you really want to help these people, but as you all mentioned today, Guam has limited resources, and it's all about funding. So I'm hoping that we are planning to build another shelter because the shelter we have right now cannot fulfill the needs we have right now. But I'm hoping, like, once this shelter is built, we have all of your support in funding this shelter because we really need it. Another way that the island could help us, if people would just come forward and volunteer to be foster parents. We're not asking long-term. Even an emergency placement would be fine for us, 1 to 2 days. This young lady here has been challenged. She goes beyond what is expected of her supervisor. She even goes out of her way to try to find placements for her children in the middle of the night. Sometimes the case can run all the way until 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And I would like her to provide her input so you understand what's really the full picture of what it is that we do when she does send out a worker. So aside from that, Ms. Michael, would you like to?
Yes, Ms. Moiko, if you could just give us a little bit of your insight. And I know that from what Ms. Linda Rodriguez was just saying, that's some of the things that we've encountered as we took a tour of Guma San Jose, and you've been telling us about a lot of the CPS workers and how if they could, they would probably just want to take these children home. I mean, so many times, you feel like your hands are tied, and so we really want to encourage folks in the community to be able to do this. What's a good number for them to contact you if they're interested in being foster parents and helping us with this?
Well, they could call our office at 475-2672 or 2653. But thank you for hearing us out. First and foremost, I do want to let you guys know that no matter what type of abuse, I do not like being a part of people's life. But unfortunately, there are times when we have to be in their lives. No matter what happens to these children love their parents. Separating them is emotionally traumatic, no matter what type of abuse they have. Okay, Currently, we have 34 licensed foster parents. We have shelters. It doesn't matter how big our shelters are because at this current time, we could only take 12 kids. Okay, this is the struggles that I've been getting. There's been a lot of families with lots of kids in their homes, not one or two. These families have 4, 5, 6 children. Since January, I think I've taken more than 25 kids under protective custody. Okay, and this is my struggle. My struggle is at night looking for placement. We encourage family placement first, okay? But here's the thing. When we do family placement, our workers assess these families and look it over and I do not like putting them in family placement immediately. I like to do a background check before I put a child in family placement. The shelter is full. This is on a Friday night. I need placement for 4 or 5 kids, okay? This is my struggle. I will have to beg licensed foster parents who are already in capacity to please hold these children just for one night. So come Monday, my workers can look at the family recommendations, the families they identified, so we could do a background check. Because we want to make sure these children are safe, these children are going to be placed in a home that this family is able to take care of. Alley shelter is full. Sanctuary is full. Our licensed foster parents, we have 34. They're full. And the next people we want to place them with is with family. I mean, we always want to place them with family, but there's also issues. You know, there's a lot of struggles. It doesn't matter what your background is. There's no discrimination in abuse, but we have to make sure when we take those children under our custody that they're going to be provided for no matter who takes care of them. You know, because legally CPS is responsible for these children. I think the shelter is to me, having a shelter for homeless children, I need to understand that more because you can't have a shelter for homeless children. Where are their parents? Even separating them at night can be emotional lead.
Agreed. No, our priority would be for homeless families.
Okay.
Yeah. But our goal is to make sure that we take care of the children.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely, we don't want to assume the risk necessarily of, you know, just having kids just dropped off. So, I mean, and you're right, the emotional
Bond, no matter
bond
who.
and the difficulty in separating children from their families, that's absolutely what we do not want. And we want for CPS to help guide this process to ensure that we're doing things in accordance with your mission, but also, you know, in all the best practices that we've seen and heard over the decades that CPS has been doing its work. We want to make sure that we're doing that. We're doing it in a culturally sensitive way, and that we're doing it in the best interest of these children.
Of course,
Thank you. Mr. Atta, we had some questions from the Department of Youth Affairs, and we know that currently DYA is housing 9 homeless minors who are not court-ordered. They are court-ordered. Okay, to DYA for corrective facilitation. Are DYA cottage homes available? Would DYA's cottage homes be available to support an emergency shelter for children?
Currently, the facility, we just recently, on the process, we're renting a facility right adjacent to the Manila facility, and we're hoping that by September we'll be able to clear for the purchase of that home. We do have a facility up in Talofofo, which was once called Halfway Home, I think, youth something, anyway. However, because of its wear and tear, and the numbers have tremendously decreased from what would have been, let's say, 30, 40 kids. We're down now. We had a decrease in numbers. Right now, we have, as of this afternoon at 1 o'clock, we have 4 kids in the cottage home. The Talofofo, another site for women, are for ladies, which is 12 also. But again, even like the water tank, it leaks, and so we got major problems up there. So we need funding if that's the case. Yes, we do have 9. 7 of these are young boys, and 2 of them are ladies. The ages can range anywhere from 8 to 17. In DYA, we have kids from the same age, 8 to as high as 20 to 21 if ordered by the court for various reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Ada. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you once again to everyone here today at this public hearing. So my question is for Mrs. Hattori from the Guam Homeless Coalition. Can you assist CPS in locating and contacting and even urging these families with children to seek shelter with current MAPS and Passports to Services outreach efforts?
Well, we have. Even during the Passport to Services, we do make CPS referrals. But I think it goes back to your statement that you don't have enough social workers. In fact, I believe for this family, there have been CPS referrals made. And during the homeless count, we actually went there to that particular dwelling. But I agree with Mayfei. You know, we can have a lot of shelters, but these are families with large numbers of children. And you're right, they don't want to get separated, but you have to draw the line somewhere because these 2 girls, their lives are ruined. And you can't take this back. And you're right that children don't want to be separated. But in our outreach efforts, we do make referrals. And in fact, we have a member of CPS, BOSA, that's on our homeless coalition. And so I don't think the issue is not making referrals. I think the issue is that they don't have enough help to go out and see these families. I mean, I personally made referrals at almost every outreach that we've gone to. And a lot of these families, they already know them. They're not new to them.
Here's the thing, we do help these families. GORA, GPD, CPS, we do our best to do everything. This family that we're talking about, I was the caseworker when I was a line worker. I got this family a home through GORA. And when the case is closed, 6 months later, they go back to familiarity. They can't pay for power, they can't pay for water, so they lose their housing. After we work so hard to get them those housing, they go back to the same point of contact. We get them these services. It's the family. We try to do our best, and these families keep coming back to our offices and to our referral after we give them a house. And I look at it and I'm like, I got them a house last year, and they're back to the same situation where they once were. When they know that we're no longer monitoring, and we monitor for a long time, for at least 6 months to a year. When they know that they're not paying, we have service plan agreements with them, and they have to make sure they maintain housing, they pay for their power, look for a job. When they know that contract is over, and maybe 3 or 6 months later, 1 year later, we'll have a new referral on the same familiar family. So we do our best.
On that, may I just ask, of the 260 children who are homeless, right, because 41% of 637 are homeless, how many would you say of that percentage are living in facilities that are not fit for human habitation? Because I think that there's different degrees of homelessness, and you mentioned that you help some and they somehow fall through the cracks, but of that percentage, how many are actually in unfit facilities or structures, and then how many would you say are habitually in that situation? And I'm talking specifically about homeless children. Do you have a percentage of that mix?
No, I don't have the percentage. We can get that though, because it would take a little while to separate out the data. But just from doing the count for many years, the majority would be in substandard housing.
Substandard
However,
meaning no water and power and windows and doors? Squatting in the jungle?
no, actually it's a wide range. You get a lot that are in tin, tin and wood housing, and that they don't have power or water. You get some that are, borrowing power from, oh, you have the number, oh good. Sorry, we have Angelina from Head Start here, and she has the number, which she can probably see because I can't. But sorry, the other issue though is that the chronic ones, right? The chronic ones that we see on the street, right, in Hagatna, that have children, we've all tried to work with them, and that's where it's very difficult. So it's kind of more complicated because it's not about just having more. Of course, we need more shelters. We need more beds. We need more social workers. I mean, I don't know. There's no easy answer because everyone's frustrated with these families, like the one right at the court with children. And we all say the same thing. My God, how come CPS isn't taking the children away, right? And it's a more complicated answer than that. I know, I'm sorry, because I say that every time I pass and see the kids. And there's a kid lying there right underneath the umbrella. We've all worked, many service providers have worked with that parent, the mother, but they don't want to be housed. But they're, what do you do with the children? Because the children get no say in this whole situation. So I applaud you for even recognizing that, we have to do something for these children. But, there's no easy answer. But Angelina has the number.
So your question was asking how many are sheltered and unsheltered. And I have the pit count report on my phone here. Looking at the ages of the kids, the total who were unsheltered below age 18, and unsheltered includes those living in substandard housing and those just on the streets. That's 303. And then by age, for those who were in the shelter on the night of the count, there were 47. That number does not include alley shelter, does not include, I think just alley shelter, right? Yeah, just alley shelter, because they don't meet the definition for HUD for the point in time count.
303 is in excess of 41% of your homeless count. And that's it's a little confusing. And that's what I'm trying to get a handle on is those that are actually either in the streets or in substandard, not fit for human conditions. It's a little confusing because, your stat exceeds your prior stat, and I'm trying to figure that out.
So what I would say is that our HMIS guys have all those numbers in detail based on the survey. And if the committee wanted to break down those who are living on the street and those who are in substandard homes, then they could filter those numbers down for us. But just at a glance, the way we term it, when you look at the pit count report, unsheltered is street and substandard.
Okay, and I think for purposes of our immediate concern, at least for mine, as I understand it, it's those that are clearly on the streets or living in conditions such as that facility behind Guma San Jose. I mean, that to me is the most, I would think, the most critical and urgent.
I agree. Right, and that is something that a lot of the mayors have contacted the Homeless Coalition about. For instance, the Agana mayor has come to our meetings several times and said that there's these group of people that sleep outside the church and that there's kids there and things like that. But just so that the public knows, we do report them to CPS. Homelessness in itself is not a form of child abuse and neglect. So CPS does go out and investigate those that they need to. But a lot of these families you see with children have been referred numerous times. And for instance, the family that's by the court, they've been housed before, like Mayfei was saying, people have been housed and come out, or we refer them to the shelter when there's room, but they won't go in because one of the partners has a record and doesn't qualify. So the other, like let's say the dad has a record, mom won't go in without him. And so those are the kind of struggles that the line staff come across. You know, even though there's space there, they won't go in. And unless they're, you know, CPS determines that they can exert custody of those children, we have no choice but to leave them where they're at.
But I think that's where I'm a little confused, because I know that we have laws on Guam that mandate that children must be protected. There's the Child Protective Act, as I understand, which dictates that short of the parents, if the parent should refuse, then the state has to intervene and take protective custody. And that's where I wonder where we have to now focus on going the added step, because I see exactly where all of you are going, and the positions that you're put in, and the resources that the limited resources that you have to execute the mandate. But as I see it also, it's very clear the intent of the law for the state to intervene in these cases. And I wonder if that's the next step that we have to look at as a body, as a collective body, to make that assessment where you actually have a coalition, much the same as this coalition and others, that will now go that added step. Because we understand where a parent may refuse for various reasons, but the mandate is really for the state to take protective custody where the parent fails. And that's what I'm struggling with, is at what point do we just say we've now crossed that threshold, or we have to cross that threshold? And I'd appreciate your feedback, because you're clearly the subject matter experts who've been struggling with this. But I can see also where, we're not following the intent of that law that was put in place for this purpose. So if anyone can chime in, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'm from Child Protective Services. My name is Arlene Garia. And so I have worked with CPS since I started with the department in '96. So I just want to clarify certain things that have already been said thus far. First off, Child Protective Services is a section within the Bureau of Social Services Administration. Amongst the other programs within the Bureau are our program management section, our home evaluation placement section, our family services section. And we're always using the term CPS, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that the mandate for CPS is different. And I know you started off your PowerPoint presentation with a particular section of the law, and it talks about at-risk or physical neglect. Homelessness, like Angelina had said earlier, is not a neglect by itself. We have to look at the circumstances of the family. And we know here on Guam, many of our families live in very substandard housing. More and more, we're actually seeing them out in the streets. So every situation is different. So one of the things as well that we have been trying to do when we go out and do our mandated reporters presentations to the different groups, it's usually our teachers, because they're our #1 reporters. We've gone out to other agencies at their request, and we explain to them the different types of maltreatment that is out there, and because they are mandated reporters, the kind of information we are looking at them to give us. Because when a person calls in, they come into CPS, they want to make a referral, they don't necessarily know what constitutes abuse or neglect. And at the same time, when we get the referral, that intake worker, especially because if it's done over the phone or someone else comes in, they don't see the child, they're going to be asking a lot of questions of that person so they can determine whether the report is valid for an abuse or neglect. And then at the same time, if it is validated, the response time required by our agency. We have our crisis workers, and then we have our regular investigators. So, and it also assists us in, preparing on the intervention needed. Sometimes our workers are going to have to go out there with police escort. because they don't know what's happening. Not only are we facing homelessness, which is one of the risk factors, but we're also seeing more and more cases involving drug and alcohol abuse, okay? And we've seen the news, cocaine is, starting to take, we're seeing that in our cases. So everyone is correct in that there are needs of the public as far as our homeless families, and true, as you said, many of these families we've worked with numerous times. We gave them the majority, all the services that we could. But the homelessness is a community issue, and I like the idea that came up that it may not necessarily have to be our bureau to help address. We can focus on those who are truly abused or neglect, and then maybe some through the coalition or other. Something can be done to expand the services that are available right now. Okay.
May I add to the conversation, if you don't mind? As I had mentioned earlier, that I have 9 individuals, and in fact, I might even have one more by the end of the day today to make that 10. But a lot of these kids that are up there right now have gone through the system with breaking the law of some sort, but they've already paid their time. And the judge would order to do a home study. And when they come back with the home study, it is often discovered that the home is not suitable for the child. And I get the question many times, why can't I go home? Why can't I go home? And I always respond to them, the court is not concerned with the rest of the family. They're concerned with you, to making sure that you are safe. My job here is to making sure that you are safe. And I offer to the table something that we all can consider. I've spoken with the Vice Speaker about this, and so were you, Senator Biscoli. Let's look at Boys Town in Nebraska. It's the philosophy of Boys Town is saving children, healing families. That's what we hope to do. We can do it, but if we can do it together, okay? Yes, I am fully aware of CPS's duties and responsibilities. Just so you would know, and it's not my job, but I want to help out. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, I had a meeting with a lady who was seriously considering of taking a female. We've given her all the options to consider. She's going to think it over, talk it over with her children. But it is hard, senators, to talk to a family and say, would you take a client? How old is he? 16. Oh, no. And he's in there behind bars? Oh, my God. No. I'm not going to do that. It's already, a threat. I am proud to say I had one. And, Senator, I talked to you about this. I have one kid. I'm proud to say I found him a home, and they're not being paid. This kid is already going to school, finishing his education. He went through all religious services, and in fact, he just came just 2 years ago. He came back from Poland on a religious trip. And so I am very proud to say that we just need to move. We need to find these kids and get them out of DYA because they don't belong behind bars. Please, I'm asking you, let us help these kids, get them out. They want to be part of the community, and they're willing to hold back. But let's not delay. Let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank again all of you. At this point, we're not done, but I just want to say that we have pretty much spoken to many of you here individually, and we've seen your work, of course, in the community. And we realized, I mean, from the start, I mean, it's very complex. And please forgive me if I made it sound simple in my haste to make it sound streamlined. I know it's not at all a streamlined solution. We are not even, close. But so we're just trying to take one bite at this apple for today. And for every other day, we're going to just keep trying to take another bite at this huge, complex issue that I'm so grateful. And I have to say that the process has made me very sad. The more you discover it, kind of the more sad we have all become. I think we've all taken turns crying in our offices because just hearing all the details, it's very overwhelming, it's complex. We understand that the mandates, but I'm focusing CPS because the way I read the law, CPS has the mandate. We have given them the authority to do things that the rest of us physically cannot do, even GPD, right? And so we want to just one more time or for today regroup and see how we can help you more, because we understand that it's complex. The families sometimes come in and out of the system. We are aware of them, and yet we're not able to, and we want to keep families together, and we've got excellent, you guys have, led us. You've led the people of Guam in the philosophy of keeping the families together as much as possible. I know the courts have adopted this, right? And everybody's trying to do this, but when we get down to the point where, that's what we need you to tell us, whether there's got to be cases where that's not working, at least temporarily, right? Hopefully long-term different, but that's the complexity, because we've got temporary, it's not working, perhaps long-term, and that also adds to the complexity. And I really am just so very grateful for all of you dedicated your lives to doing this type of work. We are all very grateful. And but so let's continue with a couple more agencies, and then we'll have a little bit more discussion. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. I'd like to thank Vice Speaker because she's really ultimately the one person that brought us all together. And it became a teamwork because of the committees we chair and, of course, the concepts that all of us shared. I also want to thank all of you for meeting with us. I understand that this is a very tough job. It affects you emotionally and physically and psychologically. And, I understand the frustration that you have because many times, because we are the oversight chair of housing, we have tried to help some of the families that you speak of, especially the one in front of the court. And yes, it's easy to get discouraged and sometimes frustrated because you see the little children there. And what can you do? You cannot take away the children by law. You cannot take them away from the family. And why would you want to do it in the first place? It does not mean that they do not love their kids because of the situation that they're in. But no, I thank you for continuing to do the good work that you do, even amidst all the obstacles that you have to face, even when you put everything into it and you think that the family's going to stand on their own 2 feet and then everything just comes crumbling down, right? Because of perhaps the human nature in certain individuals. But I want to reiterate what the Vice Speaker said is and also Senator Lee and Senator Mooney and Senator Torres is really, our concern is also focusing on the children. We cannot deny them the protection that is needed to keep them safe. And the Vice Speaker, in the beginning, she had a presentation to show just exactly where the incidences took place. And we saw it right next to Island Girl Power, Guma San Jose, and what and the Ali shelter. And so these structures, right, I believe, Mr. Duenas, they're owned by Gura, some of these structures that these people are squatting in that specific area. Can you just clarify for that?
That's correct, Senator. The old teacher staff housing across from Maria Yajoa has been transferred to Gura, and we started to develop the area. That's where we placed
Island Girl Power.
The Island Girl Power, as well as where we built Guma San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
And we also renovated, I believe, 4 or 5 houses to be used as transitional housing in conjunction with Guma San Jose.
Okay. Is that the West Care for the veterans? The
West Care for the veterans is in the UP teacher staff housing in Jigo.
Okay.
Okay. And so we started to look at what else we could put in there. The mayor, Mayor Savaras, asked us if we could stop developing that area into an institutional, stop putting in institutions or facilities. And we kind of paused there. What we're doing now, to answer some of the questions that came in, is we are reprogramming some monies to demolish the existing, I believe there's 4 houses left. And what we'll be looking to do is build some affordable rental housing units there, or possibly if public health has the funds for it, maybe have them serve as transitional housing instead of affordable housing, to increase the number of families that are receiving transitional housing. I think the key is the families need more case management than 90 days or 120 days. We're looking like a garden-style apartment complex. Maybe be able to see if we can fit 6 or 8 units in there.
So you're looking at developing transitional homes?
That's a possibility. The problem we have with whenever we use our funds is we need to know that the facilities or the structures we're building are sustainable. If public health says we don't have the money to expand the transitional housing program that's there, partnered up with Guma San Jose, then we're probably looking at just making it affordable rental housing.
Okay. And one of the questions that we're looking for is does GORA have a funding source, or can they develop a plan and implement it to add an additional homeless shelter? Focusing primarily, the goal is to focus on the children, but we do not want to separate the mother from the child. We care about homelessness overall.
The answer is we can't build specifically for children. We can build for homeless families.
Okay.
In that regard, we're looking at possibly another expansion of Guma San Jose or another shelter altogether. Again, it comes down to where are the operating funds going to come from. We look at all the facilities we've built over the last 20 years, and if we see it's being underutilized, we talk to the user agency about having to make some changes so that it can be a more productive investment on our part. You're all familiar with the Machechi facility, which was built with on land owned by a nonprofit. When after several years, when they could not show that the facility was serving the community, we stepped in, and now that facility is under the mayor's control, and I believe she's using that for part of the facility to replace something that the adult daycare facility. Right, they're doing that in partnership with public health. We're basically looking at where else can we build transitional housing or renovate transitional housing. Our community development block grant program is the largest funding source we have at $3 million, but we can't use it to build new housing. We can build facilities, but not
Can you
new
build
housing.
a shelter?
A shelter we can build,
Okay.
but we can use it to renovate houses as well, or apartments. So we're looking at what resources we have out there, what government resources are out there that can be repurposed. I'm going to give my cousin a hard time and ask him and his board to consider renovating some of their Lada Gardens housing for transitional housing. But they're going to have the same issue is, well, who's going to pay the rent? Who's going to pay the cost of maintaining the units? Who's going to pay for the cost of the utilities that the families will be consuming?
No, you're absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that up, because I'm trying to get you to say we're going to build a homeless shelter. Okay, but I know
We
why you're
can build a
hesitant.
homeless shelter. We just need
Yes.
to know that the money for operations and maintenance will be there.
Guarantee that we can use the facility for the purpose it was built, and where are we going to get that money to use the facility? So you can build the homeless shelter.
We have that. What holds us back is
The operations.
answer to the maintenance and operations,
Sure.
but also the land that it's going to be built on.
Okay, so you're going to demolish those 4 buildings, no? Right by Guma San Jose.
That's correct.
What about that land?
We are looking at, as I said earlier, developing that for either affordable rental housing, or if the money is there, for operations for transitional housing.
Okay. Because I know that perhaps there's some hesitance, not for you, but just from a different perspective, that if we build a homeless shelter, what revenue is it going to produce, right? We have to keep on providing money to make it function. But for me, we're talking about people's lives, and we have a whole room full of people that have committed to help people better their lives and the situations. And I know that in the path of your career, although sometimes it's been difficult, I know that you have made an impact in a lot of children's lives, and I know that some of them are very successful today. So you cannot deny the good work that you do, even if it's just for one individual. And so even if it's just for one family, Mr. Duenas, we need to, make sure that we find the source or the drive to want to build, to help the homeless people.
Senator,
and if we find you the operational funding,
it'll happen.
That will be your priority number 1.
I have the easiest job here at the table.
Okay.
As soon as someone shows me that this is where the land is and this is how we're going to cover operations, it can be built. Okay. Building something or renovating something that is it's already owned by the government or a nonprofit is the easiest thing to do. That's why I say I have the easiest job.
Okay.
Here at the table.
All right, very good. There was a question about your Section 8 vouchers.
Yes.
Can we use the Section 8 vouchers to perhaps do a similar program for homeless families?
About 20 years ago or so, we actually entered into we were able to secure what we call special purpose vouchers under the Section 8 program. We received 150 vouchers for a program called the Family Unification Program, where we work jointly with public health, and we basically manage the vouchers to help clients of CPS or child welfare programs, where the families cannot be reunited because there is no adequate housing. Mm-hmm. All the other conditions and terms needed for that family to thrive is there, but they don't have the housing. Okay. So we have 150 vouchers for that. We usually get referrals from public health.
And you've reached max capacity.
We were at the max. We have a wait list. But at one point, we were actually reversed the course, and we were referring families to CPS to see if they fit their client profile, and then that's how we managed to move up to capacity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. President, Bobak. I'm just warming you up. No, I want to thank Guam Housing Corporation for always being proactive in a lot of the initiatives that we are trying to push for our island and our community. We've been in constant communication with your team to discuss about the award or the Compact Impact funding that the governor wanted to focus on with the homeless shelter. Gura says they can build it. Can Guam Housing Corporation assist in the build and fund it for operations? I know it's a little bit different from what we talked about, but since he said that all he needs is operational funding, is it that easy?
Sure. First of all, Madam Chair, the formalities, I'm Chris Duenas, Guam Housing Corporation, and I want to recognize my board members that are here today because they're very committed to this process.
Yes.
We have our chairman, Mr. Frank Florig. We also have Rosanna Vidzagomas-Ugan, as well as Chilling. Miss Chilling, we got 2 Chillings, not Montanonia, but Chilling Paris. I'm going to get in trouble for that.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
So, You know, and first of all, thank you for calling me Bobek, because that's my favorite name. You know, we can, and I think first and foremost is to execute the direction that was given to us by the governor to get this procurement and RFP underway, and identifying the fact that you've written a very nice letter to me asking for the prioritization of families and particularly children. I don't think we have any issue with that particularly, and I'm glad my Primo Mike said, you know, and spoke to the issue. One of the charges that our chairman and our board, who's very supportive of this effort, have given us, because it was 5 or 6 years ago, under their direction, working with the governor, to set aside 5 houses in our inventory to service a homeless population. And the majority, if not all, that we've been servicing are families, families with children. I have a family right now, I believe, with 9 children in one of our facilities, or one of our homes. And so the biggest thing, though, really is case management. And so as we now have come to the table twice to talk about this issue, it really is working with these families. And as others have mentioned, you know, sometimes they've got strikes against them because they're not following the rules when they go into housing that they do have placement in, so we're going to have to do some more work in that area. But I think the long term is yes, and also, Senator Nelson, you have a very valuable bill, you know, going forward that provides everything that members at this table have been talking about, and that is a funding source to be able to derive to support this program, because it certainly isn't within the mandate of Guam Housing right now, although we're doing it, but it is within the purview of this august body to ensure that that funding source, should it come to fruition, emphasis and have an emphasis on this program. So going back to what you said on the long term, if Mike, you know, goes out there, GOR director goes out there and says, look, we've identified the property, we've identified the purpose, Guam Housing can sustain it in terms of the funding for operating and running the shelters, you know, moving forward, that would be an outstanding partnership, and we're definitely willing to do that. But as far as the current procurement goes forward, maybe this will be the proper test case for ensuring that we're ready on our side to work with our partners and ensure case management. Because, you know, this is a new world for us, too. We realize on an overnight shelter, you know, we're going to have to realize the clientele that are coming through, and we're going to have to really, you know, understand how we do that placement as well. And so once this procurement, or actually on the development of this procurement now, the governor is working on an executive order which is going to bring a multi-agency task force together that's going to operate the shelter. So we're already kind of within that scope, and but I do want to support your idea.
No, perfect. It doesn't matter who gets it done as long as it gets done, right? How long will it take, the procurement, and what is the process? Can you just tell us, because we've discussed it in the past that it went out for bid, you didn't get any interested bidders, so you did something different, and so we also wrote you a letter to make it an emergency, right? So
yeah, and once again, thank you to all you senators for asking us to come in and meet with you in your office to be able to discuss how this procurement has been moving along. Under our first RFI, we didn't get any submissions, but we got questions from interested bidders. During the, we also met with GSA, and they recommended that we move from RFP to a multi-step invitation for bid. And that way we'd probably get better results, and it would screen better as well, and the whole procurement looked better as a bid. The first bid that we put out, we got questions again, but no responders. And so we were guided by GSA then to our trust fund, but it was recommended that we do an MOU under Compact Impact. So that minute that funding is available, we'll issue the
and can you just reiterate for everyone to know, because we've discussed it in the past. What is it's $350,000 essentially, no? What will it provide?
Essentially, what we're looking to provide is an overnight shelter, expecting to open up somewhere around 5:30 in the evening and run till 9 a.m. the next morning. And we would run that based on referrals or law enforcement that would be out and about in the evening, coming upon families or a report of families, either loitering but not breaking the law, just being in an area where they're not supposed to be, or people who, as has been mentioned here, see children and they're worried about that situation, so they're referred either by governmental agencies, law enforcement, or otherwise. And so the shelter would take them in, accept them, of course, until full capacity. And then in the morning, we would have to ask them to vacate the premises. And then what we would also do, and as it's envisioned, is during the day, we would operate with our multi-agency partners to be able to do assessments and bring in that case management and other governmental agencies to be able to see how we can provide better services for these families.
Okay. So you're also thinking about cost of operations?
Excuse me?
Cost of operations.
Yeah, so the budget currently assessed for this is $350,000 of the, for 1 year, and it's a multi-year lease possibility subject to fund availability. I'm sure this legislature and we would, with a new funding source, be more than willing to continue a lease of this nature if it was working out well. And so we've also talked to most folks in the market, and they say a 15 to 20 unit is what we were looking at, multi-family dwelling, would be appropriate in that range of funding.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just to share, the Vice Speaker and everyone else, Senator Lee, Senator Munya, and Senator Therese, we've all been reaching out to all of our agencies or the people that work within these agencies to help these children. We're like on our third or fourth, maybe fourth week. We're fourth week now, and we've been trying to get this to happen within perhaps a little bit of an unreasonable time, but 7 to 10 days. So, that's why we requested if there was possibility that we could look at an emergency bid for the shelter, and that usually happens within 10 days. So have you looked into the possibility of that?
Well, I think it's a legal matter, and so what I did was I did discuss so far with a representative at the governor's office to talk to legal counsel about it because of the solicitation. So since we don't have a bid that's been responded to with a list or an identified vendor, I'm not sure how we would do that right now. In terms of finding identifying a facility and saying, okay, under emergency, your facility is now our homeless shelter. So that's kind of the difficulty. So we're still going over it and trying to figure out how that would work.
Excuse me, Vice Speaker. Mr. Duenas, you mentioned you spoke with property owners. So the shelter is to be built on private property or not government land?
No. These are current structures. These are current structures
to be leased.
Yeah, current multifamily dwellings or apartment buildings or others. One is a building that basically was a motel before and is currently not in operation. So we reached out.
So this is very similar then to the federal program that they have in place. I think it's under Title V, I believe, where they have grants for homeless. I think it's called the Homeless Title V. It's a Homeless Assistance Act. So this is a similar type of program then that we're doing locally. Is that correct?
I'm sure it has some programmatic elements of that, but it may not. It's not a mirror program, if you will.
Yeah, but at least though the practicality is you can move into a structure within a short period of time as opposed to erecting something. So I think that's pretty reassuring.
Yeah, we're definitely not looking at building. Those who we've reached out to are their current structures. Some of them have current residents, but they have other properties that those residents would probably be moving to. And so if they were to respond to this RFP, they would use their current structure that's in existence.
Okay, thank you. That makes it clearer. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. So can we make the emergency bid happen in 10 days?
I can get an answer to you after once again, talking You know, the thing is that because we're currently under an MOU structure, perhaps I have to discuss the expediting of that too by the Attorney General to ensure that that's all signed off on and that the funding source is in place. Then I have to find out how I can say, okay, I've looked at the 4 responders to my procurement, and can I go, you're it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Without violating procurement law. So I would say if I could do all of that, sure.
Okay. Because this is an emergency. Guma San Jose has over 60 people every night waiting. Children are being abused sexually, traumatized for life, the suffering of the innocents. These people here, there's no more foster families to house the children. No, so this is definitely an emergency for our community. We cannot continue to look the other way, and pretend that it doesn't exist. I mean, we have to care just as much as everyone here. Even though we haven't been doing it all our lives, we've had moments where we've got to walk through the homeless shelter. We got to see the people squatting, and suffering of the children needs to be addressed, because perhaps if we don't address it, who will? And I think that now is the time. We cannot delay. So, and I hope that if we can, I mean, if we all need to meet with the Attorney General and just show up at her office, I mean, we would be willing to do that. I'm sure, like all 5 of us tomorrow morning, if we really want to. The Vice Speaker's like, oh boy. But I'm just saying, I mean, it's not about political moves anymore. This is about the people. The people need our help.
Sure. And as I said, Senator, we understand because we're doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting referrals every day.
Yeah.
We're putting people, many families that came to us 2 and 3 years ago, the chairman and my special assistant, Cesar Villanueva knows, they're renters of ours now. So it works.
Yeah.
We get it. The thing is that to move on this, to do this procurement is also going to involve, working with our partners, because we also, if this was stood up tomorrow, we couldn't take 30 kids and just put them in there.
No.
Because,
I understand.
Yeah, so we need to, understand that shelter will be stood up, but it will also going to have to be in partnership, ensuring the adult supervision and everything else that requires.
Which is why we've been talking to you and
every
every other agency for the past month.
Absolutely.
But I'd like to thank the board because for all the hard work that you do, sacrificing your time and always being very proactive in housing our families. So thank you, and thank all of you here today for the service that you do for our community.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank everybody that's come today and been a part of many of the meetings that we had over the past few weeks trying to sort some of this out. For all of those who might be watching on TV or later on YouTube, it's important for our entire community to really be engaged and to be informed about not just what the issues are, but how they might be able to help. So I'm really glad that we're having this discussion, and we want to continue to have these discussions. But I just figured while we have you here, in some of our conversations, 2 things kind of came up, and I just wanted to address them now. And since we have the Homeless Coalition here, maybe you could give us a little bit more information about the breakdown of our homeless families by ethnicity. So the majority of our homeless families are...
I'm glad you asked that question, because I think there's a lot of misinformation, but it's still Chamorro.
Chamorro. And then after Chamorro?
Is Chuukese.
Chuukese, okay. Maybe could you talk about communication and possible cultural barriers, maybe when CPS or GPD respond to people in our migrant community?
Well, obviously the language barrier, and the social workers will, attest to all of that. The language barrier, but also the gender. There are some gender nuances, particularly with Chuukese, and that can make it problematic. But we have been partnering with it's a Micronesian Resource Center one-stop shop. They're wonderful. You've met them. They're a nonprofit and they're under Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I believe they're trying to form their own nonprofit, still under Big Brothers Big Sisters, but more independently. So I think we've been trying to provide them support, and they'll need a lot of community support for their operations to continue. But we've worked with them quite a bit. They come to all our outreach events. They volunteer during the count. I'm not sure with CPS if they have social workers that are from the different, oh, okay, good. But they are a huge help. And I know even the governor's task force has asked them before remember when we had the horrible incident with the fire in a substandard dwelling? They were invited to the table to talk about interventions. So I think that's being addressed on a small scale, unfortunately.
That's super helpful, thank you. And the second question that I had, and this is something that came up when we were discussing it with CPS, is one of the other barriers for people entering GUMA San Jose, or even to just get access to any kind of care, is lack of identification. And so we want to figure out how or who we need to involve in the government to assist in that. If it's an issue with they can't pay for a driver's license, or they can't afford a Guam ID, or they have lost their child's birth certificate, or whatever the case may be, we want to figure out ways that we can assist these families to make sure that they have the proper identification and they're able to access these services. So maybe if you could speak to that a little bit, you may, Faye or Ms. Rodriguez.
I could say something. Go ahead. Well, I just wanted to say, because this is something that just recently came up, when it's someone who was born and raised on Guam, it's not as much of a hurdle. It's still difficult to get, but for our migrant community, those who were not born on Guam, they need that birth certificate to go get that Guam ID and stuff. So we have a one that just I got a call on yesterday was, there's someone who used to be a principal, ran across someone who was a student before, and this person was homeless and tried to help them, but that person couldn't get into the shelter at GUMA San Jose, even though there was room. It was a single male, because he didn't have an ID, and he doesn't have an ID because he lost his birth certificate. He was a DOE student, but there was a fire, and those records are, all kinds of stuff. But the biggest problem, as I'm trying to allude to, is when they're not from Guam and we need that connection with their home state or home, island to get the document they need for their ID, and how can we get around some of that? What can we do? What kind of partnerships? And that's something that you guys can look into. The money, yeah. So also with our homeless coalition providers, there's a lot of times when we step in to help as a last resort. So let's say Salvation Army is helping someone, or Department of Labor, and they found a job for them. The person doesn't have steel-toe boots, or doesn't have an ID so they can get or doesn't have the money for the police clearance. So as a coalition, we step in on a case-by-case basis, and we spend our money to buy the steel-toe boots or pay for the police clearance and things like that. But I've shared with the coalition many times that there is an executive order that we follow in DOE, that I follow in Head Start, where if someone is wanting to be a volunteer in our agency or in any government agency, they're entitled to certain waivers of the costs for the police clearance, anything provided by a government agency. So public health, TB clearance, GPD's police clearance, the Superior Court's clearance, it can be waived if you're a volunteer. So I had approached the coalition and said, maybe something like that could be worked out for homeless individuals, so that, the coalition's money is limited. We have wonderful community partners, like, different hotels do 5Ks, and that's how we get our money. But it's limited, and so it should be something really simple to do for things like that. Something provided by the government. If you can have a homeless provider certify that this individual or family is receiving services and is homeless and meets the definition, there should be some kind of form that they can then take to GPD and say, I need a police clearance, here's a waiver because I'm a, you know, things like that.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Vice Speaker?
I want to thank again everyone who's here in the panel. And I know that there are many other representatives here in the audience from the Homeless Coalition, the Guam Housing Board. Thank you again. GURA, the Deputy Director, and other members of GURA. Thank you very much. The Public Health, I thank you. So I think, if I may be so bold or risky to kind of summarize where I think it's been, you know, where we think we're at is that getting a physical place to shelter people is still, it's very much needed. It's probably the easiest part of the problem. It's, but we need still, because we're talking about children and because we want success for these children, the way we've been doing it is through caseworkers and very many volunteer providers and services and follow-ups, but really caseworkers is what the government's been involved in, and through the work of public health, the BOSA, and we all are going to continue to do everything that we can. We know that we as senators, we're going to look closer for this operations. So operations for the long term. I think, you know, for myself, I don't even want to admit, you know, it took me a long time to really say I'm going to admit that this is like going to be a long-term thing that we need to do. We are all hoping it's going to go away, right? That somehow, you know, all the work of all the people, it's going to take care of itself. But I think we just can't do that anymore. And we've seen people literally on the streets more and more. The public's calling us. I mean, everyone is concerned, and I'm actually very happy. I even have teachers calling me. They're not desensitized. They still care very much about these children who are in their schools and then disappear from their schools, and they don't know how to follow up with them. And so many of you, and I'm very encouraged by that, and I feel like if you can go all out, we can go all out, and we're just going to try our best to just do that. So we know we need to focus. We're going to help you to follow up in anything you are currently doing. But because we're trying to, you know, help CPS, who has the authority to expand and to go beyond, you know, taking custody of kids and taking them through the court, but just really to urge these parents that this is not acceptable, right? You might be right on the line of you've got a shelter or you don't have a shelter, and maybe things are, you know, in the scheme of things, still, right? Because we've seen the incidences that have occurred, and we want to prevent those, then let's err on the side of, we want to, embolden you to err on the side of caution. We want to equip you and empower you to err on the side of caution when it comes to assessing these children. If you have any reason to think that they are in need, or, you know, or that we can put them in a shelter and that might prevent further abuse, or please, then let's do that, and let's help you. We need your guidance. You are the professionals, and so we very much appreciate all of your professional input into this. And I want to thank all the foster families that are out there, and all of us that, Mr. Ada, who has individually trying to find foster families for children. I know that is part of all of our work, yes?
And Vice Speaker, on that note, if you could just repeat the phone number for anybody watching or anybody who wants to take it down for potential foster families. I think I had that down. 472 475 2672 or 2653. 475-2653.
All right, so this is kind of the deal. You know, despite being happy about certain things and some progress, I still think that when we started this, we thought if children are actually being raped, then we got to get them into shelters within 5 days. You know what I mean? That was kind of the deadline we put on ourselves. We just And that was just because we figured we'd have to run around for 5 days, but it's been way beyond 5 days for us, and I hate to admit it, but so I kind of want to just implore all of you. I'm pleading, if we can find physical shelters, let's just, whoever has a role in that, let's do that. Let's treat it like an emergency, because I think it is, and I think CPS, if you know, and then let's we have to use what we currently have. We're short of caseworkers, but we're going to have to use your current caseworkers, volunteers, everything else that we can. We're going to have to use your current outreach programs, but I just don't want to wait, right? We don't want to be saying this kind of story again and again. We want the stories to end. We want our story to be, you know, really the progress that Guam has made in dealing with problems that we did not, you know, a lot of this is beyond our control, but this is our society. Whatever we do not take care of right now, our children are facing. I mean, that's what's creating the other concerns in our neighborhoods that we have to really address. And so I just feel like this is one way to get straight to the issue of, yes, Dr. Hattori Uchima.
Sorry, I mean, it's exactly what you're saying, but I'm a little unclear, and Senator Torres brought it up. If the bottom line is safety of the children, I mean, does it require a different mandate of CPS? Because, I mean, we've heard the idea is to keep the children with the parents, and so, I mean, I just think Senator Torres brought up an important point that maybe a different line needs to be drawn than the current line.
No, well, that's what we're hoping. We have the line where you're going to either take them into custody, right? That's where you've been kind of drawing the line. You assess and you decide whether you need to take them into custody. But I'm just saying there's so many other lines short of that we want you to be more firm with these parents. The statute says if you offer them assistance and they refuse, then that in itself is neglect, right? And if you offer them the assistance so that they can take care of their children and they refuse, that's the other line, right? And yes, and so Senator Torres.
If I may, what I was also going to ask is, in our most immediate step, is there a way that we can reassess the rules and regulations within the shelter, say Guma San Jose? There are different categories of clients that they accommodate there that we saw. There are single people, there are couples, and there are families that are sheltered in that facility. But as an immediate step, is it possible to prioritize women and children pending additional shelter being stood up by GORA? I mean, could that be an alternative in the immediate case, or is that unreasonable?
That's an operational issue that Public Health and CSS can handle. We built the shelter for families, homeless shelter, is trying to accommodate as many families who have children. Again, that's an issue best dealt with by Public Health and CSS.
Yes, and we understand that, and I know part of it is beyond our control, but I just brought it up as an issue that perhaps, you know, that can be one remedy right now to help address this homeless need. Because going back to what Margaret said, it's what's really bothering so many people is, you know, the blatantness of children in the streets and children peddling in the streets and children being exploited by their parents to peddle on top of what we read in the headlines. So that's what I'm referring to. And that at this moment, I understand the good efforts that everybody's putting into the mid and the long-term fix, but in terms of that most immediate outrage that we're all feeling that's just wrenching us, you know, that's what I'm hoping we can maybe come up with a solution to that.
Yeah, I'm also hoping that's what we're all together for, because when we see if another place opens up and Department of Public Health is going to be the one making these types of decisions, and they say reprioritize our existing structures versus, you know, prioritize use of new structures for different purposes. Yeah, I'm.
And you know, if they're unwilling to engage in services, then we have the ability to bring it to the family court. Again, we all recognize that the placement is an issue, whether it's for foster children or even just those children in the community who are homeless, especially those in the street. Senator Torres mentioned something about peddling. We're seeing more and more families out there, and then, you know, while the parents are peddling, the children are there. There is a law in regards to peddling, but unfortunately it's not being enforced as well. And I know when we first saw a case a couple of years ago with a family, and they were constantly out there, you know, and I had talked to GPD, and even at that, they kind of, it's like, we all see it, but, you know, we're not enforcing that. I don't know, may need to revisit that as well, because it does, if it's not being enforced. Some people will use it. They're not necessarily homeless. They might say they're homeless. So, again, those are just some of the things we need to take into consideration. And again, you know, I may have sounded desensitized earlier. Every case is different, and like they said, you know, the levels of homelessness, substandard, and so forth. And when we do go out there, we find that the families do make certain provisions. I don't know, we say a lot about kids in the street. We talk about them being out there in the daytime. I don't know about in the evenings. I don't go out in the evenings in those areas that people report them. I'm assuming they don't always sleep out in the streets as well. Fortunately on Guam, I mean, because this is a subject we've been talking with our technical assistants as well. Unlike nationally, you know, you're talking about exposure to the elements. Fortunately, that's not the situation here in Guam. I'm not saying it's okay, but, you know, it's just one of the things here. All the other jurisdictions, they experience that. And I've asked them, how do they address that? You know, so we just kind of have to assess the level of risk for these families.
Well, thank you again. And we're going to have to end for now. And like I said, this is just a small part of what we can do, and we're going to have to continue to work. And I just want to thank again BOSA, Public Health. I think you are leaders in how we're going to really manage this. And the rest of us are all here to support you in getting to these children and doing what you think you need to do, and that we're all here to help you in that. Yes, Mr. Castillo.
We'd just like to thank the 5 ladies that are focusing on this. I mean, where's the man? I mean, he's at on this side of the street. Oh, I'm sorry. But yeah, no, but we'd like to thank you very much. I think we're all with you, so
yeah,
thank you.
No, of course. Yes, Mrs. Carpenter, Karen Carpenter.
There's another population, and it's parents with their kids who leave an abusive home. They are now homeless if they don't have anywhere to go. And they've done that first step of trying to keep themselves and their children safe. But then, and I can tell you, Ali, Women's Shelter is most of the time full. Then they come to Vero. Usually we're the next ones. Vero can only do 3 to 5 days. We're the emergency. I mean, we are the now. You know, if I get somebody a call right now, we can have them in shelter in an hour. But it's short term. And then where? You know, and that's the thing. The homeless shelter is full. This is full. There are a couple places you haven't mentioned. I'll just tell you. Salvation Army has something called rapid rehousing. And so they have helped some of our people to be able to get into that. And then also Sanctuary has a new program. It started in November, I believe. It's for, I believe it's 18 to 22-year-old young women who have a child, and they can now assist them. So it goes a little further than the 18-year-olds. I I don't know a lot of information about that. You'd have to ask Sanctuary, but it's something new that we have found out, and we have referred to that program. I mean, we're out there looking for anything we can find, because I just don't want you to, and I can tell you, shelter needs are on the rise. We've had more calls this year than ever for shelter for these parents and children who are leaving abusive situations.
Thank you very much. And again, can't thank you all enough. And so for that, we're just going to end this hearing today. Of course, you can contact any of us, and of course, any of the senators. We're all committed to this. It's not just the five of us. We're just, you know, most of these issues, we just need someone to focus, and they're all going to help us. I know that they help us all the time, their advice, and we have to support each other in when it comes to voting on any kind of bills. But we just wanted to help you with anything that our offices could provide in getting the word out. First of all, this is a good forum, and in just urging and coordinating and just making it very, very clear that we are here for you, whatever it is that you need. So thank you again, and si Diyos masi to everybody.